It's good to see you all. And for those who may be looking at this talk in the future, I welcome you wherever you're at. Interesting when we were chanting, may we receive and maintain these teachings. It's such an ongoing practice, such an ongoing question of how we respond, even to the very teachings themselves. So I'm up here in Orange County, a little bit out of the city, and here in New York, upstate, autumn is really unfolding. Most of the leaves are off the trees where I am, and the nights have gotten really kind of chilly. Uh, and so we nestle into our blankets and turn up the heat. And, you know, there are a lot of warm-blooded critters running around, and they want to come inside and get warm too. So we're faced with this dilemma of, you know, what do you do when you have a bunch of furry creatures who are inside the house? And of course, they can wreak havoc. They chew wires and cause electrical shorts. They get into food, and their droppings are actually kind of dangerous because they carry hantavirus, which can be deadly. So you're faced, or we're faced with the decision of what are we going to do? And it brings up questions of killing. You know, some people would say, well, get a cat, or we have a cat. And if you've ever seen a cat torture a mouse to death, you know that, you know, it's not a humane way of killing. It's just they keep on catching the mouse and tormenting it, and then letting it go a little bit, catching it again. And so we consider other methods, you know, glue traps are hideous, horrible. So we settled on a poison that won't poison other creatures if they eat the dead mice. And of course, I have, you know, no doubt that they suffer before they die. And, you know, the stench of their death hangs around in the walls. It's there. It's a reminder. It's a karmic reminder of killing. And I begin with that story because I guess I want to, before I talk about this koan I want to talk about tonight, I want to um, just bring about that it's very hard to think in this world that you could separate from killing. You know, it's a part of what's going on. It's a moral kind of dilemma that we deal with in our practice. And particularly now, these are really turbulent and violent times. Those in power are increasingly abusing their positions to make a point of dominance. And people are threatened with hunger. Food is being weaponized. SNAP benefits are being held up as a consequence of the Democrats not approving the big ghastly bill. But, you know, by approving the bill, they will make healthcare too expensive for many people, pricing them out of their own healthcare or making them decide between healthcare and food. So it's just an awful choice to have to make. And all of this is playing out in a national display of dominance that is breathtaking, just breathtaking. It boggles the mind. I still find it hard to believe that the President of the United States released an AI-generated video of himself piloting a plane that dropped feces, shit, on all of the No Kings protesters. You know, when dogs assert dominance, they usually will raise their leg and piss on another dog. That's their way of saying they're the dominant one. So here we are in a digital age. Our president basically just squatted on um, all America and released his load, wearing a crown. And as we've seen, when power and dominance are constantly asserted, violence can become normalized. And I, I believe that in a time of increasing governmental violence, it's important not to separate from it, not to close your eyes to it, to witness it, to be present, and to be honest about the ways violence shapes all aspects of our life. And yes, and even to question and re examine the place of violence in Zen. We are isolated from violence in Zen teachings. Koans that feature violence occupy this like kind of weird place in Zen, right? Because they carry this paradoxical energy. In religion, we're so deeply rooted in this nonviolent tradition, and you know, Shakyamuni Buddha and the first precept really emphasized nonviolence. Yet there are koans that show us teachers slapping students or tweaking their nose or otherwise hurting them, and it's all somehow it's acceptable um, because it's about teachers trying to wake their students up. And so I thought in this talk I would take a deeper look at the implications of violence in Zen and how these ancient teachings might bring us a deeper understanding of our Zen practice in these times. And, that's one aspect of practicing in the shit show. It's like reopen the door to questioning so much. I think it's done that for so many. And perhaps that's even, a reason that someone like Mamdani could win. I think a lot of people are questioning essential facets of life in America and wondering why it is. When I originally studied some of these koans in interview, I expressed my discomfort with them. There's the koan where Gute cuts off the finger of the little boy, his servant, who has developed this rather cute habit of imitating his one finger Zen. And we're told, or I was told, it's probably just figurative. He really didn't cut the finger off. It was really just a way for Gute to wake this kid up to, his own experience, not imitating enlightenment, but what's his own experience. And it's that he experienced in that moment of violence, whether his finger does get severed or whether it's threatened with severance. And we have Nansen Kills the Cat, a vivid koan that uses this cat to make a point of non-separation. Now, I'm going to go through Nansen Kills the Cat. And I guess in both Gute, his one finger Zen, and in Nansen, I wonder what if we don't excuse away the violence? What if we look at it as just what it is? Take it at face value. And one author who I found really useful in studying these koans is Matthew Juxon Sullivan, who wrote his own translation and commentary on the Blue Cliff record called The Garden of Flowers and Weeds. And I found him useful in this particular case because he doesn't shy away from being appalled at the violence. And in presenting a koan like Nansen Kills the Cat, which I'll go through, he reminds us that there were real political reasons why some of the early Zen Buddhist koans used violence as a teaching method. So here's what he says about it. Medieval China was chaotic and bloody, riven by invasion and civil war. Many rulers, especially in the late Song dynasty, believed the nation had grown weak because the elite had grown too refined. They sought to glorify war and masculine virtue, very much like what Pete Hegseth is doing now. All right, that's an aside. But Sullivan continues, in response, Zen teachers who compiled the koans and the scriptures emphasized the fiercer, more forceful aspects of Zen to align with the imperial ideals. They highlighted the rough confrontational languages of early masters like Rinzai to make Zen seem more virile and strong. And the strategy did work because while other Buddhist schools suffered during this time, Zen thrived and became China's dominant sect. So there's a historical reason why we still have, or we see some of these koans emphasized. It's not only a koan, Nansen Kills the Cat, about non-separation, but it's also a kind of display for those in power to say, no, we are not weak. We are a strong, disciplined sect who deserve or worthy of the imperial dynasty. So I keep on talking about Nansen Kills the Cat, so now I'm going to go into it. And I'll just say it is one of the most popular koans. It's in the Gateless Gate. It's in the Blue Cliff Record, and that's the version I'll be using today, only with Japanese names, because I find them easier to keep on saying. And it's also in the Book of Equanimity. So case 63, the Blue Cliff Record. One day, Nansen came upon the monks of the eastern and western halls quarreling over a cat. Holding up the cat, Nansen said, "You monks, if one of you can say a word of Zen, I will spare the cat. If you cannot, I'll cut it in two." No one spoke. Nansen cut the cat in two. It's interesting to ask, what would you do? Nansen holds up the cat. I'll infer some details from my own life of having cats. Since a feral cat would not willingly ever come into a place where there are lots of people, I think it's pretty likely she's a temple cat, a domesticated cat that doesn't fear humans. And for this little exercise, we'll call her Lily. And one day, the monks of the East and West Wing are arguing over Lily. And of course, there's already some separation here because the monks are identifying themselves according to whether they're from East or West. And for our purposes, let's say the monks in the East Hall are in charge of cleaning the Buddha Hall. And Lily's shedding all over the cushions, leaving uneaten parts of mice around and just making a mess. The monks in the West love having a temple cat and they don't want her separated out. So they're arguing. And their argument is it's snowballing. It's managing to pick up every other problem East and West halls have with each other. So it's gotten quite heated by the time Nansen comes in. He's been working in the fields. and sees this ridiculous fight. These monks are spitting mad at each other. So he picks up the cat by the scruff of the neck. And once again, we can infer that this is not a feral cat. A feral cat would not allow itself to be picked up. And he has his garden machete in the other hand, and he says, "Say a word of Zen, all of you monks. Otherwise, I'll cleave this cat in two." And I can just imagine the monks are so dumbfounded that their teacher would do such a thing. Hold up this cat. Maybe they don't believe he's really going to do it. No one can say a word of Zen. So he cleaves the cat in two. And Lily's screams fill the temple and her blood spews out. He drops her to the floor in pieces. The monks are in shock, and Nansen leaves them there to consider the scene. And we do have a mess here. You know, one of the questions that arises, is it ever justifiable to take a life to make a point? Well, happens all the time. Is it wrong to take a koan literally? Again, it happens all the time. Or is there something larger to consider here? Symbolic or not, the koan of Nansen Kills the Cat forces us to consider the dissonance in our practice between insight, compassion, and between enlightenment and violence. It forces us to be present to what is. And I think for me, that is a vital teaching of it. And another interesting aspect of this koan is, as it's presented in Blue Cliff Record, it's cut in two. So here we go to the second part that completes the entire case. And the second part of the koan, we have case 64 of the Blue Cliff Record. We learn that evening when Joshu returned, Nansen told him what had happened. And Joshu removed his sandals, placed them on his head, and walked away. And Nansen said, "If you were here, I would have spared the cat." So when Joshu returns, now Joshu is, he will become Nansen's successor. He is one of Nansen's closest monks. And he returns in this second koan, and he notices something's off. There's kind of a pall over the entire monastery. He sees that the monks are kind of closed down. And he goes to his venerable teacher, who recounts the story of what happened. And after learning of what happened in the Buddha hall, Joshu takes off his straw sandals, places them on his head, and leaves the room. And at this, Nansen had what he wanted. That word of Zen, that expression, that response. You know, so many of the koans are about what's the response. In this case, this response brought him to a place where he could say, "Oh, if you were here, I would have spared the cat." So several authors and other interpreters of the koans have noticed or observed that placing sandals on your head is often a gesture of mourning. And other people can't find, or was a gesture of mourning in ancient China. Others have said they can't find evidence. So we're not really sure what the significance of placing these sandals on his head is. And I think that's a good thing. because I think all of us need to consider, how do you respond when hearing of such acts? And how do you make amends for the suffering? And as with the dead mice in my walls, there's no escaping this karma. It's present. And again, I return to Sullivan's reflection on the koan, because for me, it was very meaningful to have someone finally sort of say something that mirrored my own discomfort with this koan. He says, I meditate for the cat. It didn't deserve to be killed. It makes me feel bad. The cat's death exposes many things wrong with Zen: its fascination with violence, its tolerance for questionable behavior in the name of non duality, and its willingness to elevate the pursuit of awakening above the needs of beings right here and now. I think our main job now is to make amends to the cat by changing the tradition from the inside. And this begins on our own cushion. We meditate, or rather, we kill the cat when we meditate for ourselves. So he's pointing to another kind of paradox here, right? Because there's this whole tradition where the great sages sat for years and years to try and attain enlightenment. But what he's saying here is that's all, if that's all you're doing for yourself to attain enlightenment, then you've kind of lost the meaning of enlightenment. The only true way you're going to get to know it, or to feel the strength of your practice, is when you're helping others. And it's really confronted me, with this question: what separates you from action when someone is threatening harm? And what are we doing to help those being harmed in these times? And if anything, the beauty of this koan is it shows us the necessity of taking action in the face of harm. And in terms of the situation in the US today, I firmly believe in the power of nonviolent protest, and I will continue to do so. But more and more, I feel like, people who are really hungry and suffering, they can't eat our posters. So, it's like another level. Where I am now, there's a town like a mile away. It's tiny. And after so many years of being around, this town has 4 bars and not a single supermarket. And people are hungry. People are living hand to mouth in this town. And in my own practice, and working with this koan and others, I found a food pantry, and I'm volunteering there and donating there. And you run into a lot of people when you're giving away food, and a lot of people who aren't necessarily, who politically are totally at odds, but you all want to stop the suffering. People are hurting. So in closing, I want to circle back to Shinryu Roshi's recent talk, where he told us about the Apala flower, the blue lotus that blossoms in the fire. And practicing in these times, the fire is hot. Staying present, witnessing even the violence, allowing the emergence of Buddha mind is so important. When the flower blossoms, what do you do? Our practice keeps us in a ready state to respond. So it's up to all of us in a way to respond to the damn dude with the knife.